The other big question around adult crime for adult time is, will it work? What difference will it make? Let's bring in Queensland criminology expert Dr Terry Goldsworthy from Bond University. Terry, good morning to you. Where do you stand on adult time for adult crime?
Look, I support it. In terms of what kind of impact it will have, I don't think it will make much difference in terms of property crime. And that's simply because, if you have a look at the Curia-Murray, they've done a good analysis of the outcomes for youth offenders, and you can see there clearly, as we knew anyway from, the data, is that, youth offenders don't get the maximum. So I don't think it'll make much difference in terms of property crime and things like that. What it will do is remove those those artificial barriers that were there for judges in terms of sentencing youth offenders. So now the judges will not have to consider that. So it'll come back wholly and squarely to the judge's discretion as to what sentence they will give. Where it will make a difference, I certainly think will be for murder offences. And that has probably been one of the big issues that the media have focused on, the outcome of murder offences involving youth offenders. And Emma Lovell's case from where she was stabbed during a home invasion is a case in point where the offender who was convicted got 14 years and he's now appealing that sentence as being too severe. Under these laws, if they go through, he will get 20 years mandatory sentencing and then be able to apply for parole after 20 years.
Now, you mentioned the property crimes and often cases where they don't get the maximum. And I think this causes a lot of unrest among the public when they see that they don't get maximum penalties. Will that work? Will they be happy with that?
Well, I mean, judges are independent from the bureaucracy and from the parliament, and that's the way our Westminster system works. But they also need to ensure that their sentencing reflects community expectations. So as you just heard the former Premier say, the government was elected with a mandate. They made this quite clear. This is what their policy was. So I think the judges need to be cognizant of that and go, okay, well, this is what community expectations are. How are we going to sentence now? And as I said, they won't be able to rely now on an artificial ceiling that was contained in legislation. This will be their responsibility. So if they're not sentencing in accordance with what community expectations are, then the government will need to look at what further steps could they possibly take. Do they need to consider minimum mandatory sentencing for serious repeat offenders? Things like that. That's something, I guess, that they'll have to look at in the next 12 months to see how it's panned out.
Yeah, so is that being included, to your understanding, that mandatory minimum sentencing for repeat offenders, Terry?
Not that I know of. I haven't seen the bill. I did have a look for it yesterday, but I couldn't find a copy anywhere. So hopefully today it'll be up somewhere on the parliamentary website, and I'll be able to have a look. They've talked about it, and Christopher Foley has said that it would be on the table. They're not ruling anything out. But I think they'll probably do this first, see how it affects the criminal justice system, the landscape, and maybe in 12 months' time if things aren't improving. I mean, because we need to remember the backdrop of this is that we are at a 20-year high for our crime rate in Queensland. So, there is a crisis. If that is dealt with and starts to go down appreciably, then they'll be made to leave the package as it is. But the detail will be important. And the adult crime, adult time is just one part of those making community safer plan they went to the election with. So I'd be interested to see what are the intervention programs, what are the rehabilitation programs for these young offenders when they're in custody. And do we have enough places to put them in custody is the other question we have to ask.
Well, we know that capacity is going to be an issue at youth detention centres and also in prisons in Queensland on that point. I want to ask about, a lot of youth advocates particularly have said we don't need to get tougher, we need to get smarter. Talking about those early intervention plans, rehab programs and so on. Has there been enough focus at that end in your mind, Terry?
Yeah, look, I'd agree with that comment. You can get tough with crime it's a continuum. So you have the pre-crime, committing the crime, what happens after the crime. So you can have intervention programs or diversion programs to stop someone pre-crime so they don't go down that path. You can then, you get tough on crime when they're committing it. You need to stop the offending to protect the community. So they're not mutually exclusive, having a tough on crime approach, but also ensuring that you have the programs in place to rehabilitate hardcore offenders, or at least attempt to. So at the moment, I think our serious repeat offenders, the Auditor General report said, came out with a 72-hour plan. Now, that is just a waste of time. The LNP have identified that. So how they're going to fix that, what they're going to put in place, will be the detail that we'll need to see either in legislation or in policy announcements over the next couple of months. I mean, they asked for 100 days. I probably think that's reasonable. But after 100 days, we want to see what their detailed plan is and what the promise of reducing crime and how that'll be achieved.
Well, on that point, David Crisafulli has effectively staked his political future on its success. He said that measure, in his first term as Premier would be to reduce victim numbers. That's how he would be judged.
Yeah, that's right. You're exactly right. I pointed that out in a column I wrote in the Courier Mail that he has tied his future to victim numbers, and the kind of red flag I raised was that, unfortunately, if you tie it to numbers, you could actually reduce crime but still fail because we've got an increasing population in Queensland. So the numbers may well increase, but the rate may decrease. So I think it was a foolhardy promise to make, and he did try to step it back the day before the election.
Yes.
To rates. But, you never look at crime in terms of numbers. I mean, numbers are interesting. Like if you're going, we've had a 50% increase in murders and you've gone from 1 to 2, then you don't need to worry too much. But if you've gone from 1,000 to 2,000, you do. But rates are what we look at. Rates are the important measure for criminal justice issues.
Okay, and that's what we should be looking at as we see whether these new law changes will be successful or not. Terry, really good to get your insights this morning. Thanks so much.
No worries, thanks.
Professor of Criminology, Associate Professor in Criminology at Bond University, Terry Goldsworthy. 23 past 7 here on 612 ABC Brisbane.
When you hear about all these things being discussed, and we know it's not just youth crime, we've heard about social media, all these things affect